Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of this static fire test of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket at Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. It's good to be with you here in these pre-dawn hours of Sunday, February 8th. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. We will reiterate this throughout the course of this coverage, but you are watching a static fire test. This is just a test of the Falcon 9 rocket that will support SpaceX Crew 12 mission to the International Space Station. Launch is targeting liftoff from this pad at 6:01 a.m. Eastern, 11:01 UTC on Wednesday, February 11th. The static fire test is an important precursor to the actual launch operations coming up later this week. They want to ensure that all systems on the Falcon 9 rocket and the supporting launch infrastructure operate as expected before, of course, putting humans on board. This is just one half of the equation that will happen really at the pad tonight, or that will happen at the pad before launch. Tonight will be the brief ignition of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the booster, tail number 1101. That will be followed by a dry dress rehearsal when the crew of Crew 12 will go through all of their launch day operations. They'll head to the pad as they will on the morning of the 6th, or the morning of the 11th. Board their Dragon spacecraft, go through the process of hatch closure, and then take this down to simulated just before T0. That helps the launch teams as well as the crew get familiarized with what will happen on launch day. At that point, though, there will be no propellant on board the Falcon 9 rocket. This is just the second time that NASA and SpaceX will launch a crew to the International Space Station from this pad. Previously, Crew 9 departed from this launch site, and as we've learned from SpaceX, all Dragon operations moving forward as planned will happen from Slick 40 as SpaceX shifts their attention at Historic Launch Complex 39A away from most single stick Falcon 9 rocket launches and focus on Falcon Heavy operations there alongside future launches of their Starship rocket. There's not a firm date for when Starship will start flying from Florida, but the Federal Aviation Administration did give final environmental clearance for SpaceX to complete pad infrastructure improvements out at Launch Complex 39A, and the first flight of Starship is expected sometime later this year. For those of you who are with us for our coverage of the Falcon 9 rocket launch for the West Coasters earlier today, welcome back. If this is your first stream with us in the past 24 hours, welcome in. Certainly appreciate the more than 200 of you who are staying up late with us. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream. It allows more folks to find their way into this countdown coverage. The reason we don't have a countdown clock up just yet is because we're still fine-tuning what we believe the T0 to be. Given that this is a static fire test, SpaceX does not announce the fueling milestones or what the exact T0 of this static fire test is. So we're going based off of known milestones for crewed flight. One of those was the retraction of the crew access arm, which happens at around T minus 42 minutes. We're also watching for the start of the big vent, which happens beginning at about T minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. And there's the start of the big vent, which suggests that the T0 is coming up here at 3:16 p.m. So in just about 20 minutes from now. And again, for those just joining us, you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of a static fire test of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket at Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. This is an important precursor demonstration of the rocket's capabilities and a test of its systems prior to the planned launch of the Crew 12 mission to the International Space Station. That's coming up later this week on Wednesday. big vent has wrapped up. SpaceX now preparing to transition to upper stage liquid oxygen load in about 10 seconds. As we're continuing to track the fueling of this Falcon 9 rocket, I want to thank our moderator, Jeff Hansen, for being with us here in the live chat. You can all make his job just a little bit easier by following our live chat rules. We ask that you post your message in English so that Jeff and any other mods that might pop in can respond as appropriate. We also ask that you hold off from delving into topics of over politics or religion, and please don't post in all caps. Emojis are perfectly fine. We just ask that you don't create a huge block of them so it takes up a large chunk of the chat. Oh, and I see we've got Aussie Space Girl joining us as well, which is wonderful. Last but certainly not least, for the live chat, we ask that you treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated, and we'll all get along swimmingly. Our editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast this morning. Photographer Adam Bernstein is out and about, making sure that the cameras were in position well ahead of this static fire test beginning. If you're not following him or our other photographers, you can find them at their handles here on X. Adam is at ABurnNYC. John is at John Pisani Photo. And Michael is at MD Kane Jr. Also, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. You can find us on Blue Sky, Threads, and Facebook as well. Stepping briefly through our countdown test timeline here. Again, for those just joining, this is a static fire test of the Falcon 9 rocket. There will not be a launch today, barring something going catastrophically wrong, which we certainly would not want to see. Let's go ahead and step through the milestones that SpaceX has already completed and look ahead at what's still before them before igniting those 9 Merlin engines at the base of the booster. We saw the crew access arm retracted around T-minus 42 minutes. That was followed by the arming of the launch escape system. Fueling began with the loading of RP-1, rocket-grade kerosene on board both the first and the second stages at T-minus 35 minutes, with liquid oxygen loading beginning at that same time. Fast forward to just a few minutes ago. Second stage LOX load began at T-minus 16 minutes. Coming up next is the engine chill starting at T-minus 7 minutes. SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps to help protect those engines from thermal shock and damage during startup. First stage kerosene tank will be filled at about 6 minutes out, and then at T-minus 4 minutes, the Dragon Freedom will transition to internal power. The first stage liquid oxygen tank will be filled at about T-minus 3 minutes. Same will be true on the second stage at T-minus 2 minutes. At that point, the Falcon 9 rocket will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. They'll begin their final pre-launch checks at the 1 minute mark when the rocket shifts over to its automated startup sequence. Control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. At that same time, the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch call, but again, this is not a launch. This is just a static fire test. The engine ignition command will be given at T-minus 3 seconds, and then we'll see a brief engine ignition at T0, which should last around 10 or fewer seconds in total. The booster that is supporting this static fire test and ultimately following a good static fire, the launch of Crew 12. This will be just its second flight. It previously launched the Starlink 6-88 mission back at the beginning of January. For those who enjoy the iconography of human spaceflight, there are 4 patches that are connected to this crew and their upcoming mission on board the International Space Station. Show those to you now. You can see on the left, that is the mission patch designed by the 3 astronauts and 1 cosmonaut of the Crew 12 mission. On the right-hand side, that is the mission patch as designed by SpaceX. During their time on station, the Crew 12 complement will be part of Expedition 75, and you can see that mission patch design there on the left-hand side. And the one on the right for Epsilon, that is in recognition of the flight of European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adno. She will become just the second French female astronaut to head up to the International Space Station. Taking a look at our chat here, I want to thank Arun Quake for £1 super chat. Appreciate that support from one of our channel members. Also, thanks to Roxy Jacobson for the $3 super chat. Really appreciate the support this morning. Just under 7 minutes now. At this point, SpaceX is performing the engine chill on the 9 Merlin 1D engines at the base of the booster. Falcon 9 rocket and Dragon spacecraft made their way out to the pad on Friday as the crew was arriving here to Florida's Space Coast. Here's some video that NASA shared of the crew arriving, touching down at the former shuttle landing facility, now the Space Florida managed launch and landing facility. Unfortunately, because of the hour of arrival, NASA made the decision that the crew would arrive, but without the normal complement of media there to greet them. So, unfortunately, we were not able to talk with him then on the tarmac, as is typical with the commercial crew program missions. But the crew will be speaking to the public later today from their quarantine at the Kennedy Space Center in a virtual news conference that is expected to begin at about 11 a.m. Eastern this morning, 1600 UTC. Just inside of 5 minutes. Again, because this is a static fire test, we will not be getting pad level views or mission audio from SpaceX. So those normal things that we would bring in for Starlink launch, or certainly much earlier for launch day coverage, that's why you're not seeing or hearing any of that. Just, because this is a test. That is Sophie Adno and Commander Jessica Meir on the right. They'll be joined by Jack Hathaway, the astronaut with the mustache that you just saw, and cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev from Roscosmos. The clamp arms just beneath the Dragon's trunk should have opened now, and the strong back should be in retract right about now. Again, we are not going to be getting call outs from SpaceX given that this is a static fire test, and B, our T0 is set based off of a couple of events, the retraction of the strong back and when we started to see the big vent. So bearing those two in mind, at this point, the first stage liquid oxygen tank should be full. And again, the clock is there mostly to help keep us on the right frame of mind with where things should be with this static fire test. T-minus 2 minutes and counting. At this point, the Falcon 9 rocket should be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Seeing the ground gas closeouts there, the release of the remaining liquid oxygen from the feed lines there at the pad. Now T-minus 1 minute and counting. Again, this is to what we believe is the T0 for this static fire test. Visuals seem to be lining up with the timeline for ignition in just about 40 seconds from now. The SpaceX launch director would have given their go for ignition about 10 seconds ago, coming up to the final 30 seconds. Again, this is a static fire test, not a launch, just to reinforce expectations here. Should see the engines fire for on the order of 8 to 10 seconds. Coming up here in roughly 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition. Test is underway. And it appears we have engine shutdown. Our mic is a little bit far from the rocket, so we'll crank that up and see if we can hear some rumble. Mixed in a little bit with the wind noise, but we could definitely hear the rumble of those 9 Merlin engines. And what appears to have been a good static fire test of Falcon booster 1101. At this point in time, SpaceX and NASA will go back in and review the data from this test as they complete their final evaluations, conduct a launch readiness review assessment, and step in towards final pre-flight operations. For tonight, this morning, however you want to think about it, SpaceX will safe the rocket and train off any remaining propellant on board and vent the remaining liquid oxygen as well. Crew access arm will swing back towards the Dragon once the rocket has been safed. And again, teams will conduct an assessment of the data to confirm that they are ready to proceed towards a launch at 6:01 a.m. on Wednesday, February 11th. One thing worth noting, the last time SpaceX did a static fire ahead of a crew launch, there was offshore wind that blew some of the soot from ignition back onto the Dragon spacecraft, and they had to do some cleaning of that vehicle before they proceeded, which memory serves delayed things by a day. That was the reason why Commercial Crew Program Manager Steve Stitch noted that there was the separation that we're seeing between static fire and when the dry dress rehearsal is taking place, and of course when launch is coming up on Wednesday. Crew 11 will be our next Falcon 9 rocket launch as currently scheduled, barring a slip. And we'll have our standard coverage for a crewed mission beginning about 4 hours prior to liftoff. All goes well. This will be the first of 2 launches that are scheduled for SpaceX on February 11th. Crew 12 is up first, again at 6:01 a.m. Eastern, and that'll be followed by the launch of a batch of Starlink satellites from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. That mission looking to fly at 6:07 a.m. Pacific, which is 9:07 a.m. Eastern, or 13:07 UTC for those around the world. So a busy day coming up midweek. And again, we expect to hear from the crew around mid-morning today, in addition to pre-launch briefing coming up on Monday. So, hearing from the crew at 11 a.m. Eastern, 24 hours later, a pre-launch news conference, and then we'll get into the rhythm of launch day on, again, February 11th for the launch of Crew 12. Want to thank our moderators who've been helping us out in the live chat today. Thanks to Jeff Hansen and Aussie Space Girl for helping us out. One last look before we wrap things up. This is your Crew 11 crew. From left to right, we have Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev, Jack Hathaway from NASA, the pilot, Commander Jessica Meir, and mission specialist Sophie Agenel from the European Space Agency. This crew will spend roughly 8 months on board the International Space Station. We'll have coverage of launch and docking as well. Want to thank our photographer, Adam Bernstein, for having the cameras primed and ready to capture this static fire test. And a thanks as well to our editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast today. Most importantly, though, thanks to you for wherever you've been watching from. We certainly appreciate your time and attention in these early morning hours. And again, as we mentioned during our coverage of the Starlink 17-33 mission earlier today for those on the West Coast. Hope you all have a wonderful wrap up to your weekend, whether you're taking in some international athletics with the Winter Olympics getting underway, or you're settling in for the big game later on tonight here in the States. Hope you have a wonderful Sunday, and we'll be back with you with more coverage of Crew 12 in the run-up to their launch. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks, and until then, bye-bye.